Most people believe financial stability comes from a bigger paycheck. But what if the secret isn't in what you earn, but in your relationship with the stuff you already own? Today, we're looking at why a person earning $50,000 with a minimalist mindset is often wealthier than someone making six figures and still living paycheck to paycheck. Every object you own has a second cost, a hidden price that's quietly draining your freedom, one purchase at a time. Encouraging, personal. Today, I'm sharing 10 frugal minimalist rules you must follow to break the endless cycle of consumption and start building something far more valuable. True financial freedom. It's time to stop collecting more things and start collecting more life. Because sometimes the fastest way to become wealthier is to own less. Susan used to believe a price tag told the whole truth of what something would cost her. She learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, that it never does. Every object she brought into her kitchen carried a second, quieter cost that never showed up on the receipt. There was the number the cashier read out loud, and then there was everything that came after it, waiting patiently in the background. The toaster oven that seemed like a bargain needed a shelf, a cord, a place to be dusted every single Sunday morning. The used car that looked like a steal needed insurance, oil changes, new tires, and a garage to sit in through the long winter months. Frugal families of the past understood something modern shoppers seemed to forget the moment they reached the checkout counter. They asked what an item would cost them for the rest of its life, not merely for the next 5 minutes of a shopping trip. A cheap coat that wore out by December was never really cheap, no matter what the tag promised at the register. A sturdy coat that lasted a decade, quietly, without complaint, without a single torn seam, was the real bargain all along, even though it cost more up front. Before you buy anything now, stop for a moment and ask what it will actually cost you in space, in time, in upkeep, in worry. That single question, asked honestly, can save a household thousands of dollars over the course of a single year. It sounds almost too simple to matter. It is rarely practiced, even by people who consider themselves careful with money. Grandmothers once kept small ledgers by the kitchen window, tracking not just what they spent, but what things cost them long after the money had already changed hands. This is the very first habit that separates families who stay stable through hard years from families who slowly drown in things they never truly needed in the first place. And once you start seeing the hidden cost behind every purchase, you can never quite unsee it again. Picture a grocery store aisle, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a cart half full of items that all seem reasonably priced on their own. Now imagine walking through that same aisle with the two-cost rule quietly running in the back of your mind, sorting real value from clever packaging. The habit does not make you paranoid about spending. It makes you patient, careful, and quietly confident that every dollar leaving your wallet has earned its place there. Linda kept a drawer in her hallway that she almost never opened. It sat there for years, quietly full of things she had once believed she needed desperately. One afternoon, while cleaning out the house after her mother passed away, she asked herself a question that changed the way she shopped for the rest of her life. If this disappeared today, right now, without warning, would I spend my own hard-earned money to bring it back into my home? For most of what filled that drawer, the honest answer, the uncomfortable answer, was simply no. That is the emotional audit frugal households used for generations, long before minimalism ever became a trend with a name and a hashtag. It is not about throwing things away out of guilt, and it was never meant to feel like punishment. It is about seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time, what actually serves your life and what has simply been sitting there, gathering dust, taking up space in your home and in your mind at the same time. Clutter is not only physical, though it often feels that way when you open a closet door. It is mental weight you carry without even realizing you are carrying it day after day. Every unused item whispers a small, constant reminder of money spent and never truly used, sitting there like a quiet debt to your own good sense. Run this test on your closet, your garage, your kitchen cabinets, your bathroom shelves. You will likely be surprised, even a little unsettled, by how much of what you own would never be repurchased if it vanished tonight while you slept. That discovery is uncomfortable at first, almost embarrassing to admit out loud, but it is also deeply freeing because it shows you exactly where your money has been quietly leaking for years, hidden in plain sight behind cabinet doors you rarely think to open. Once you see it, the next purchase decision becomes noticeably easier. Linda now keeps a small notebook by her front door, and once a season, she writes down anything she is tempted to buy before actually buying it. Weeks later, she reads the list back and laughs quietly at how many items no longer interest her at all. The drawer in her hallway is empty now, and it stays that way on purpose, a small monument to a lesson learned the hard way. Patricia's grandmother owned exactly one good pair of boots, and she wore them faithfully for 11 winters without complaint. At the time, young Patricia thought this was simply what poor families did, buying less because they had less money to spend. Years later, she understood it was strategy, not scarcity, and the difference between the two changed everything. A $100 pair of boots worn 200 times across those winters costs about 50 cents a wear, which is almost nothing when you break it down honestly. A $20 pair that falls apart after 5 outings costs $4 a wear and leaves you standing back in the same store within the month, wallet open again. This is the value metric that generations of careful households used instinctively, without spreadsheets, without apps, without anyone teaching them the formula out loud. They were never chasing the lowest price on the shelf. They were chasing the lowest cost over time, which is an entirely different pursuit, requiring an entirely different kind of patience. Before your next purchase, do the quiet math sitting right there in the store aisle. Divide the price by how many times you will realistically use the item over its lifetime. A well-made item you use constantly, week after week, is almost always the wiser investment over a cheap one you replace again and again out of necessity. This single shift in thinking, cost per use instead of cost at checkout, has quietly kept frugal households solvent through recessions, through layoffs, through lean years that would have broken families who only ever looked at the sticker price and nothing more. Grandmothers understood this in their bones. It is time we remembered it in ours, before the next sale sign catches our eye. Picture Patricia now, standing in a department store, quietly running the numbers in her head before her hand ever reaches for her wallet. It takes only a few seconds, yet it changes everything about the decision she is about to make. Cost per use is not a rule about spending less. It is a rule about spending wisely, and there is a meaningful difference between the two. Jennifer's phone still worked perfectly fine, and there was nothing objectively wrong with it at all. The screen was clear, the calls connected without a single dropped word. The battery held a charge comfortably until bedtime every night. Yet every advertisement she scrolled past on her lunch break told her, quietly and persistently, that it was somehow no longer enough anymore. This is the trap modern marketing sets for millions of households every single year, and it is a remarkably effective trap. It is not built on genuine need, and it never really was. It is built on boredom, on the small dopamine hit of something new and shiny arriving in a box on the porch. Frugal minimalists draw a hard line here, and it is one of the most protective financial habits a household can possibly build for itself. Define functional strictly and hold to that definition without apologizing to anyone, including yourself. If your phone still calls, if your car still drives safely, if your appliance still does its one simple job without failing, resist the pull to replace it simply because a newer version exists gleaming on a shelf somewhere. Ask instead whether the current version has actually failed you in some real measurable way, or whether you have simply been convinced to feel a manufactured dissatisfaction with something that works perfectly well. This single boundary, drawn firmly and kept consistently over years, prevents the slow bleeding of thousands of dollars annually toward upgrades that solve no real problem at all, only a passing feeling that fades within days of the next purchase arriving. Our mothers and grandmothers kept appliances running for 20 years through careful maintenance. We can learn, again, to do the same. Jennifer eventually taped a small note inside her kitchen cabinet, a simple reminder written in her own handwriting. It asked one question only: does this still do its job? Most days, the answer is yes, and that quiet yes has kept hundreds of dollars in her pocket every single year since. Barbara still remembers when spending money required real, deliberate effort on the part of the spender. You walked to the bank in person. You counted your cash carefully at the counter. You felt the physical weight of it leaving your hand before it left your possession. Today, a purchase takes one single tap on a screen, sometimes without even a password standing in the way. This ease is not an accident of modern convenience, and it was never designed with your savings in mind. It is engineered, quite deliberately, to remove the pause that once protected every household budget in America for generations. The frugal answer is to rebuild that pause on purpose, by hand, one decision at a time. For any non-essential purchase, wait a full 24 hours before allowing yourself to buy it. For anything larger, anything significant, wait a full 30 days before committing your money. This single habit, so small it seems almost too simple to matter at first glance, quietly dismantles the impulse that drives so much unnecessary spending in modern life. You will notice something strange begin to happen during that waiting period, almost every single time. The urgency fades. The item that felt utterly essential on Tuesday afternoon often feels entirely forgettable by the following week. This is not deprivation, and it was never meant to feel like punishment or restriction. It is friction, restored deliberately in a world carefully engineered to remove it at every turn. Families who practice this rule consistently report the exact same discovery, again and again, without exception. Most of what they almost bought, they never truly wanted at all in the first place. They only wanted the feeling of buying it. And that feeling, it turns out, passes on its own if you simply give it enough time to fade quietly away. Barbara now keeps a small sticky note on her phone case, a single word written across it in marker: wait. It is a tiny thing, almost silly to admit out loud, yet it has quietly saved her family more money than any coupon or sale ever could. Deborah and her husband bought a bigger house, and for months afterward they could not understand why their savings kept shrinking despite earning the exact same income as before. The mortgage itself was manageable, comfortably within their budget. That was never really the problem they faced. The problem was everything the bigger house quietly demanded of them afterward, month after month, expense after expense. More furniture was needed to fill the empty rooms that echoed at first. Higher heating bills arrived every winter, larger than they had ever budgeted for. More time and money were spent cleaning space they barely even used most days of the week. This is the lifestyle multiplier effect, and it is one of the most overlooked forces quietly shaping household finance across the country. A single major purchase rarely, if ever, stays single in its consequences. It triggers a chain reaction of smaller expenses that follow it home, like an ecosystem, each one small enough to ignore individually, all of them together large enough to sink an entire family budget. Before any major purchase now, ask what this item will multiply going forward, not simply what it will cost you up front at the register. A bigger car may quietly mean more gas, higher insurance premiums, and pricier repairs down the road. A new hobby may mean new gear, new memberships, new subscriptions nobody accounted for at the start. Frugal households learned, often through hard experience, to see the whole chain before committing to the very first link in it. That single habit of forward calculation has quietly protected family budgets from collapse for generations, long before anyone gave it a name. Deborah now asks a simple question before any major purchase enters her home. What will this bring with it? A puppy brings food, vet visits, and fencing. A pool brings chemicals, maintenance, and higher utility bills every single summer. Seeing the whole chain in advance has become, quietly, one of her family's greatest financial protections. Karen wanted to learn how to sew, and for years she was almost certain she needed to buy a machine that would change her entire life. Instead, on a whim, she borrowed one from a neighbor first for a single month, just to see how it actually felt. She discovered quite quickly that she loved the idea of sewing far more than the actual, patient, sometimes frustrating work it truly required of her. That borrowed machine saved her nearly $300 and an entire shelf of clutter she would have felt quietly guilty about for years afterward. This is the testing phase that frugal households have always used before committing fully to something new and unproven. Rent the equipment first. Borrow the tool from someone you trust. Try the hobby before you ever own it outright and permanently. This is not about being cheap, and it was never about being unwilling to invest in yourself or your interests. It is about protecting yourself from your own passing enthusiasm, which is more common and far more expensive than most people are willing to admit out loud. Some interests survive the testing phase completely intact and become lifelong passions worth every single dollar eventually spent. Others quietly fade the moment the borrowed item goes back to its owner, and that fading tells you everything you needed to know before you ever reached for your wallet in the first place. Test first, always. Buy second, only when you are certain. It is a small reversal of ordinary habit that saves families from closets full of good intentions and half-finished hobbies gathering dust in the corner. Karen still sews today, a decade later, on a machine she eventually did buy, one she chose with full confidence because she had already proven her commitment first. The testing phase did not stop her from pursuing something she loved. It simply made certain the love was real before her money followed it. Nancy decided one cold January morning to count every single pair of shoes sitting in her house. She expected to find maybe 8 or 9 pairs at most tucked into her closet. She counted 23 instead, and the number sat heavily with her for days afterward, uncomfortable and quietly revealing. This is the power of a simple annual habit that frugal households have practiced for generations, counting specific categories of what they already own. Shoes, coats, kitchen gadgets, coffee mugs. It truly does not matter which category you choose, only that you actually sit down and count them honestly. This awareness works as a natural deterrent against mindless accumulation in a way that willpower alone rarely manages to achieve on its own. It is genuinely difficult to justify a new blouse when you can see clearly in black and white that you already own 20 you rarely even wear. The counting itself is not really the point of the exercise. The awareness it creates afterward is the true point, and that awareness follows you quietly into every future shopping trip, whether you intend it to or not. Once you have counted honestly, you cannot unknow that number again, no matter how hard you try. Families who adopt this small ritual, once a year, one category at a time, report a strange and welcome side effect that surprises even them. Their spending slows almost on its own, not from strict restriction or guilt, but from simply seeing clearly what they already have sitting in quiet abundance all around them. Nancy now counts a different category every January, a small tradition she looks forward to rather than dreads. Coffee mugs one year, coats the next, kitchen gadgets after that. Each count teaches her something new about the quiet gap between what she owns and what she actually uses. Mary received a raise at work, and within 6 months her spending had risen to match it almost exactly, dollar for dollar. She was earning more money than ever before, yet somehow felt no more secure than she had the year prior. This is lifestyle creep, and it is one of the quietest threats to financial stability in modern American households today, precisely because it never announces itself clearly. It simply happens, one small upgrade at a time, until the extra income has vanished into a slightly nicer version of the exact same life as before. Frugal minimalists counter this quietly, with a single powerful decision made well in advance of any raise. They define their enough, clearly and specifically, long before temptation arrives at the door. What does a stable, comfortable life actually require, specifically and honestly, within your own household and your own values? Once you know that number, once you truly know what enough looks like in practice, every dollar earned beyond it can go toward freedom, instead of toward more accumulation and more clutter. This is not about earning less, and it was never about abandoning ambition or hard work. It is about deciding, before the raise ever arrives, exactly where the finish line sits, so that more income becomes more margin, instead of simply more stuff filling more rooms. Families who define their enough early in life describe a peace that genuinely surprises them, because for the first time, earning more money stops feeling like an endless treadmill and starts feeling like real, tangible progress towards something that actually matters. Mary eventually wrote her own definition of enough on an index card, taped quietly inside her wallet, where she would see it often. It reminded her every time she reached for her card that she had already arrived somewhere many people never do. Enough is not a small ambition. It is, in truth, one of the largest freedoms a household can ever claim for itself. This is the lesson that quietly ties every other rule together, and it is the one most families discover last, often later than they would have liked. Michelle spent 15 years measuring her own worth by what she owned: the house, the car, the closet full of things that once felt like proof of her success to anyone watching. It was only after a difficult season arrived, a layoff, a health scare, a forced and unwelcome pause, that she finally understood what true wealth actually meant to her. It was never the markers of status sitting quietly in her driveway or crowding her garage shelves. It was optionality, the quiet, powerful ability to simply say no when it mattered most. No to a toxic job she could finally afford to walk away from without fear. No to a purchase she no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Yes, instead, to a calculated risk, because she had already built enough margin to survive comfortably if it happened to fail. This is what every single rule before this one has been quietly building toward all along without ever announcing its true purpose out loud. The two-cost rule, the replacement test, the cost per use calculation, the spending friction, the multiplier awareness, the annual counting, the clearly defined enough, all of it exists to build one final invisible asset that no price tag could ever capture or measure. Trade your stuff for your life, deliberately and with open eyes. That trade, made quietly and consistently over many years, is the real inheritance frugal households have always passed down to their children, long before anyone ever called it minimalism at all. Michelle tells her own daughter now, often, that the goal was never to own less for its own sake. The goal was always to owe less, to need less permission, to answer to fewer things pulling at her time and her money. Every rule in this list points toward that same quiet horizon. Not less life, more room to actually live it, on your own terms, without apology.